Welcome to Your Next Best Chapter, a Central New Jersey divorce and family law podcast.
Welcome to Your Next Best Chapter, a Central New Jersey divorce and family law podcast with Laura D'Orsi. Laura is a highly respected divorce and family law attorney based in Red Bank, New Jersey, with more than 30 years of experience helping individuals and families navigate divorce, custody, alimony, and other complex family law matters. I'm Lisa Mosby, your host, and in today's episode, we're talking about alimony in New Jersey. Laura will explain how it's evaluated, what actually matters in these decisions, and what tends to carry far less weight than people expect. Welcome back, Laura.
Hi.
Laura, in New Jersey divorces, when does alimony typically become part of the conversation and when does it not?
Alimony is usually considered in situations where there's an imbalance of the incomes of the party, where one person maybe had been a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad, and the other person really pursued the career. And, there's a big difference of incomes. There's different types of alimony. There's open durational alimony, and that's usually in situations where it's a marriage of more than 20 years. There's rehabilitative alimony where it can help somebody get back into the workforce. Maybe they didn't finish their college degree and they need a few more courses. There's also what we would call term alimony or limited duration alimony, which would be alimony for a certain amount of years based on the years of the marriage. And then there could be reimbursement alimony where maybe if you one person worked while the other person went and got a graduate degree, there could be some kind of reimbursement for that. So you actually could be awarded different types of alimony. You could be awarded more than one type of alimony. So, it's actually, but it's usually in situations where there is a difference of incomes. And then there's other factors that the court looks at as well.
What are the main factors New Jersey courts look at when deciding whether alimony is appropriate in that instance?
The actual need and the ability to pay, the duration of the marriage or civil union, the age and physical and emotional health of the parties, the standard of living that they had during the marriage, and the likelihood that each of them can have that standard of living, a reasonably comparable standard of living after the divorce. They look at the earning capacities, the educational levels, the vocational skills, and the employability of the people, the length of time that they've been out of the job market, any parental responsibilities that they have, the time and the expense that it's going to take that other person to acquire education or training to enable the other person to get back into the workforce, the history of any financial and non-financial contributions to the marriage by each party. And that would also include any contributions to the care and education of the children, the equitable distribution of the assets, what each party is going to walk away from in the divorce, and the income available to either party through investments and assets, the tax treatment of the alimony, and the nature and length of any sort of pendente lite support, which is a support that somebody gets while they're going through a divorce, and any other factor that the court deems relevant. So the court kind of balances those factors in determining what kind of alimony there's going to be, how long it's going to be for, and how much the alimony will be.
So I'm kind of curious, how does the length of the marriage influence the type and duration of alimony that may be considered?
So as I indicated when we started, when someone can receive what's called, there used to be something in New Jersey called permanent alimony, and people were awarded permanent alimony, and they basically thought they were going to get it till the day they die. So it really wasn't exactly that, though, but I think that's another topic, for another podcast. But when someone has been married for 20 years, a lot of people come to me and they've been married for 30 years and they're going to seek a divorce. Well, the alimony awarded in any marriage of more than 20 years is called open durational alimony. And that means it has an open duration. So when the parties get divorced, the agreement or the judgment of divorce will say this alimony is for an open duration. So that means there's no time limit. But things can, even open durational alimony can end because people are given a right to retire eventually. Like people aren't expected to work till they're, 95 years old. So even open durational isn't really forever. It could end, it could be modified, and there's also other things that could make the alimony end. When alimony is given for limited duration, it will not be given for more than the years of the marriage. So if you're married for 5 years, you're not going to get 20 years of alimony. There could be other issues that come into play, though, like if someone has like a terminal illness or someone becomes disabled while you're married, there could be possibly situations where even it was only a marriage of 5 years, alimony could be awarded for longer because of the situation involving the people. If one person is just cannot work or, has very, ill health, or also if there, could be a situation with respect to the children. There might be, like if you have severely disabled children and one person just cannot return to the workforce, there might be particular situations there where, the court might make provisions. Obviously, there would have to be like a hearing on those issues and show why this parent is needed to be there with the children because they cannot work. They need to, be there to like, lift the child out of the wheelchair every day or, things like that. So again, that would be fact-based. With respect to rehabilitative alimony, the person might have to put forth like a plan, like, oh, I don't have a college degree, but I have an associate's degree. So it's going to take 2 years for me to get my bachelor's degree. And then I will be able to, have my bachelor's and I can get a better job than I would get now because I don't have any degree. And so with respect to rehabilitative alimony, you have to put a plan together usually, or maybe you're going to enter and get some kind of like, someone wants to become a nurse and they know of the time frame on that. So that's usually how rehabilitative alimony works. You need to put forth a plan as to what educational prospects that you have and what your plan is and how you're going to achieve them so that there's like a limited amount of time or funding related to that. And then with reimbursement alimony, that would usually be awarded, like, let's say somebody, the parties are together and one person decides, I'm going to go to medical school. And one person basically works and they work, 5 jobs to help pay for the medical school of the other person. And then they think, oh, but down the road, they're going to be a doctor. So it's going to be worth it. But then let's say, when they graduate medical school, they say, see you later. Well, that would be a situation where somebody might seek reimbursement alimony. And I guess we would look at, what the earning capacity is going to be of this individual that you help to support. And, what kind of basically like almost like a compensation you're entitled to since you're not going to benefit from that by being married to them. How we can kind of give you almost like a reimbursement, like they're calling it reimbursement alimony. What can you be given so that your efforts of working these 5 jobs and working, 9 to midnight every night for the 5 years or the 6 years they were in medical school isn't for nothing. So, again, everything is very fact specific. It could be law school, it could be nursing school, it could be, training to become a plumber. It's just that one person basically supported the other person while they were trying to achieve that degree. And if the marriage doesn't work out, how they can be compensated for it.
Then, Laura, what are some common assumptions that people have about alimony that don't really line up with how it actually works in New Jersey?
So I think sometimes people think that if there is fault in the marriage, that there isn't going to be alimony. So they, let's say it's a situation where the husband is the main primary wage earner and the wife stayed home with the kids, but the wife has an affair or, isn't the best housekeeper or, really, enjoys kind of like going out with her friends a lot and isn't really around for the kids that much. I think people think that the fact that somebody is bad or somebody isn't like the best housekeeper or isn't the best parent, that comes into play. And it really doesn't in New Jersey. I mean, we are what we call a no-fault divorce state. So even if, your spouse, you don't think that they're the best spouse in the world, you still might have to pay them alimony. So that is something that's come like a misconception that people have. They think, well, because she, went out with John the barber, um, and she's married to me, I'm gonna throw her out on the street and not support her. And that usually is not the situation. You usually still do have to pay alimony to that person. Now, if you're paying alimony, let's say people get divorced and alimony is established. Usually most agreements and the law in New Jersey indicates that the person who receives alimony cannot do what we call cohabit or cohabitate in a relationship. They can live with their sister, but they can't really live in a relationship, um, like a marriage-like relationship. So, if one person is receiving alimony and the other is paying alimony, it's the idea that the person paying alimony shouldn't really be supporting, in this situation, the wife and her boyfriend. So people can come back to court to seek to have the alimony be modified or terminate based on cohabitation. So that is something that, we really have to, we always advise our clients, look, if you're going to get an alimony, you can't live with your boyfriend, or you have to be really, and there's other factors that kind of come into play with that as well. It's not just living together. It could be holding yourself out as a couple or going on vacations or, um, you know, attending family holiday events together. So, um, there's, again, all these different things, and there's additional factors as well that are looked into as well as to whether or not alimony should be terminated or modified. But it is definitely something that you want your clients to be aware of, that the fact that they are jeopardizing losing their alimony if they want to live with the person in their new relationship. So
You touched on a couple of these, but I just want to clean it up a little. How do lifestyle during the marriage and any financial documentation affect how alimony is evaluated?
So, the statute regarding alimony indicates that both parties are entitled to the standard of living that they had during the marriage. And unfortunately, if we look at, when you're married, you have a certain amount of income coming into the household. If both people work, let's say the wife makes 100,000 a year and the husband makes 200,000 a year. So you have 300,000 available to that family. Just given math, both people are not going to be, so if one person makes 200 and one person makes 100, there's a $300,000 lifestyle that family has. That is not going to be a possibility. No one person is going to have a $300,000 lifestyle going forward if one person makes 200 and one person makes 100. So really what's going to happen is, with alimony, and especially, again, but given all these other factors like the length of the marriage and the educational capacities of the parties and all these other factors that we talked about earlier, the court is going to kind of try to make it so that both parties have a similar lifestyle. So that's where the alimony comes in. It's not going to really equalize it, but it's going to get it close to that. So but basically neither party is going to really truly have that lifestyle they had in their marriage, because it's just financial impossibility. You can't have one person living on zero so that the other person can have $300,000 of income. So, it's going to be basically like somewhere in the middle there.
And then how do changes over time, like retirement or even job changes, remarriage, how do all of those affect alimony obligations after the divorce is finalized?
So, with respect to remarriage, if the person who is receiving alimony remarries, alimony ends. That's like an automatic thing. Um, if one person loses their job and, they can no longer pay the alimony obligation that they have, then they have to come back to court and show the court that they have had what we call a substantial change of circumstances. And then if they have had that, there can be some relief there. And then with respect to retirement, um, usually, once people hit what we call the full Social Security retirement age, which kind of varies based on your birth year and, your age that you can collect the full Social Security that's available. Right now, it's usually about age 67. So once you're 67, if you're still paying alimony and you are truly going to retire, which means you're only going to live on your Social Security, you're not going to, still work or, just work 20 hours a week or something like that, you can make an application to the court to have your alimony terminated. But if you are still working, the court may not automatically terminate the alimony. So, it could really, again, it's very fact specific. So you really need to consult with an attorney to determine, whether it's worth it to make this application if you are still working and you are of retirement age. But if you are truly of, the retirement age and going to retire and you're, just going to live on your Social Security and you're moving to Florida, you can make that application and then the determination will be made as to whether the alimony will end or if it will be reduced. And, that is definitely something that you have the right to do. Also, if the other spouse, the person receiving the alimony, has a big change of life. Let's say they were a stay-at-home dad their whole marriage and they really didn't have a career, but then after the divorce they decide, I'm going to go to law school, and they go to law school and they become, a big attorney and they're making basically what the other spouse is making. Then the spouse who is paying the alimony can come to court and say, there's been a change of circumstance here. My ex is now making what I make. I shouldn't have to pay alimony. So that could also be another situation where there could be a change in the alimony. And also, if the spouse who is receiving the money receives a big inheritance, and we could look at that and say, well, now they have $5 million available to them and they could get income of that. There's something called the Miller bond rate that's usually used with respect to determining income on assets. And so we could say, well, look, if they got 5% a year on $5 million, they would have, a substantial amount available to them. So the person paying the alimony can also come to court and say, look, I shouldn't have to pay alimony anymore. We're basically equal. They have this big inheritance they can get income on, and that's equivalent to what I make at my job. So alimony should no longer continue. So there are all these different situations that could come around where there could be a change of circumstance. And you could go to court and seek relief to be relieved of your obligation or have the obligation reduced.
Laura, thank you so much for guiding us through the rules, the factors, the information pertaining to alimony in New Jersey. That's it for today's episode of Your Next Best Chapter, a Central New Jersey divorce and family law podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Laura and her family law practice, you can visit lauradiorcelaw.com, where you'll find information about alimony, divorce, and other family law matters in New Jersey. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share the show with someone who might need it today. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.